Welcome everyone to our Thursday webinar for Phenology Week. If you're just joining us, we're really excited to have you here to celebrate Phenology Week and happy spring equinox as well. We are really excited to celebrate Phenology Week because it's a chance for us to kind of slow down and look at all this cool stuff that's happening around us, celebrate all the spring activity happening with plants and animals. My name is Erin Postumus. I am the Partnerships and Projects Manager here at the USA National Phenology Network at the University of Arizona. I'm joined today by our Outreach Assistant, Mackenzie Ty. She's going to be helping monitor the chat and the Q&A. So today we are going to be talking about visualizing phenology data. So really excited to be able to look at some data. I love looking at the phenology data that are collected by our Nature's Notebook observers. So really excited to show you all how to do that. So I did just want to get started by highlighting we have one more webinar as part of Phenology Week. So if you go to our Phenology Week landing page, maybe Mackenzie can put that in the chat for you all. We have one more webinar that is tomorrow, and that is a researcher Q&A. We're going to have 3 researchers who have actually used the Nature's Notebook data in scientific publications in the last year. So really excited to be able to share what they've done, and you'll have a chance to ask them some questions too. So please join us for that final webinar. So today we are focused on phenology data. And I wanted to just kind of start out with, for some of you that might not be as familiar with the kind of data that we collect, just to give you a brief overview of what those data look like. So if you are a Nature's Notebook observer, you're probably very familiar with this, but I'm just going to go to the Observe with Nature's Notebook page here. And I want to show you a couple of our protocols that we have for our species. So when someone is a Nature's Notebook observer, the way that they record information is they will pick out either an individual plant or an animal species that they observe over time. And so if you have a plant, you're actually going to go back to that same plant. So for example, if someone picks out a sugar maple, they will actually go back to that same individual tree over time, and they will answer a series of questions about what they see on their tree. And so they're going to be answering things like, do you see breaking leaf buds? Do you see leaves, increasing leaf size? And then we have questions about flowers, open flowers, and fruits. So each time they observe, they can either say, yes, I see this, and we call them phenophases, or also the life cycle stages, or they say, no, I don't see this, or they might say, question mark, I'm not sure. For animals, it's a little bit different. So for an animal, obviously you don't know if it's going to be the same individual animal that you're seeing, but we're asking you to look for that species every time you observe at the same location, and we call those your sites. And so at the site, you'll look for the species, and you'll look for whether you see or hear live individuals, which is just any adult individual, any behaviors like feeding, flower visitation, and then reproductive phenophases or life cycle stages. Maybe you see nest building, you see a hummingbird with a little bit of spider web or something in its beak. Development stages, like whether you see nestlings or fledged young. And then you can also answer about the method. So whether you had maybe a hummingbird feeder at your site. So
Real quick, Erin,
yeah,
can you
go
make sure
ahead.
that the chat is on? I just like couldn't
Oh, it
tell.
should be open, but yeah, let me
Okay,
double check that. I think, yeah, I think you can share that link
okay.
to,
It said it went to hosts and panelists, so I just wanted to
okay,
make
I think you just have
sure.
to change that drop down from host and panelist to everyone. But let me
I
just do that.
have hosts and panelists, and then you is my option. Maybe
Okay,
it's
maybe
just
it's
me
a
that doesn't have
limitation.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I put that in the chat. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah,
Just
let
want to
me
make
just
sure.
make sure that that's turned on. Okay, I got it. I think I changed it,
Okay.
so now you can chat with everyone. Thanks for
Yes, I
pointing
can.
that out.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. We're good now. So that was just kind of a really brief overview. So when someone submits data in Nature's Notebook, the data are actually available for anyone to use. So as soon as you submit a record, it'll go into a couple different places where people can either download an Excel file, they can access the data through a statistical program called R, or use another API to bring the data into another program, or they can use our visualization tools to look at the data and kind of explore the data and then decide what they want to download. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be visualizing the data using our visualization tool. And there's actually three different ways that you can get into the tool. So I'm going to go through briefly each of those three ways to get in, and then I'm going to show you on the final way how to actually go through with making a calendar. So just to get a sense, and if you don't know exactly how to answer this question, that's totally okay. But I'd like to get a sense of whether you are interested today in visualizing your own Nature's Notebook data, if you're already an observer, whether you want to view data collected by a local phenology program. If you don't know what that is, that's fine. You're probably not part of one of them. If you want to explore data that are collected by other people, or if you're not sure, that's totally fine too. Okay, so we've got a lot of Nature's Notebook observers. Oh, we got some local phenology programs too. And then a few people that either aren't sure or want to collect data or explore data collected by others. So that's great. Let me just share those results with you all. So thank you for reporting that. So I'm going to start out with looking at the data that you have collected yourself. So the way to do that is you first have to get to your observation deck. And the easiest way to do that is always to go to this Observe with Nature's Notebook menu, and then find this big orange button for your observation deck. So we're going to go there, and so it's loading now. And so, as you can see here, you might have been here before, but this is where you can manage your sites, the plants and animals at your sites, and then see some other details. I am part of actually multiple local phenology programs in addition to my personal sites. If you are just a personal site observer, a backyard observer, you might just see this personal sites, and that's great. Where we're going to go today is actually this visualization tab. So you can see these orange tabs here. We're going to go to this one in the middle. This calendar tool is actually not working right now, so don't worry about that. We're working on getting that fixed. But if you scroll down, we're actually going to go to this button down here. So again, this is on the visualization tab, down to the Visualize My Data button. And this is a really special link because if you click on this link, we're actually going to load up the visualization tool, and it's going to be preset with a filter to just show the data that you have collected yourself as part of Nature's Notebook. So you'll first arrive here, and so now we are actually in the visualization tool, and there's going to be two other ways to get in here, but this is just the way you get in through your observation deck to look at your own data. And so when you get into the tool, you can't really see anything yet, right? It's a big blank screen. It says preparing. So if you look on the left here, this panel, this is basically your first step. You're going to have to pick what kind of visualization do you want to make. And so today we're going to be making a calendar, a phenology calendar. So you click on that button, and now you can see like, okay, we're going to start making our calendar now. And you can see that it changed, and now it says your data, user ID 2927. So that's me. I'm user 2927 because I came in through my observation deck. So that's a good way to just make sure you're looking at the data and it's kind of loaded correctly. Okay, so that looks good. We're going to go to next. Because I'm looking at my own data, I don't really care about making a boundary, a geographic boundary. If I wanted to, I could do that. And we'll look at that later when we get to looking at the data collected by others. But for now, I'm just going to just skip that. I don't need to worry about that. Then it's going to ask you about the year. For a phenology calendar, you can select many years at a time. Today, we're just going to be focused on making a calendar for last year because it's our most recent complete year. So I would change that to 2024, go to next, and then now I'm at the point where I get to decide what species I want to visualize. So I'm not going to go into details here because I'm going to show you the two other ways to get into here first. But if you are planning on using your own data, this is where you can kind of sit tight and wait for us to catch up going through the other ways to get in here. So just want to check in and make sure, are there any questions so far? Is anyone having trouble getting to this point if you are looking at your own data? Nothing yet? Okay. So now I'm going to go and show you the second way you can get into the tool, which is if you are participating as part of a local phenology program, or if you just want to view data collected by a local phenology program. So really anyone can do this next method. So there's a couple ways to get to look at the local phenology programs. The easiest way to get there from your observation deck is by going to My Programs. And you can see I'm part of a whole bunch of programs, mostly because I am a staff at the NPN, and so I like to check in on them, and I've been working with them for various reasons. You probably would never see this many local phenology programs. You might see nothing here, and that's totally fine. But right here is your quick link to get to the local phenology program map page. So we're going to click on that. This is also accessible through our community menu, but this is just the easiest way to get there. So now you can really pick any of these programs that have a green dot. Those are our active local phenology programs. You can pick any of those to visualize data. So if you want to look at one that's near you, you can do that. I'm going to zoom in. I'm here in Tucson, so I'm going to go all the way in here in Tucson. And I'm actually going to pick out a program that's actually very close to me here, which is at the University of Arizona. So I click on that green dot, and then it says U of A Campus Arboretum. That's the name of the local phenology program. This is the category. It's a botanical garden or arboretum. So I'm going to click on this view profile, and now I'm looking at the profile page for this program. And so anyone can do this, even if you don't have a Nature's Notebook account. If you come in through our local phenology program page, maybe we can put this link in the chat too. If you want to jump right to this point of looking at the map, I'll put that in the chat so you can look at that. But I already clicked on this profile page. And so you can see here, here's another data tab. This is where I can actually visualize and download data from this particular local phenology program. And so I can do this even if I'm not part of this program, anyone can view the data. So I'm going to go to this visualize program data, and this is a very similar kind of link to the one that we looked at from the observation deck, where I click on it, it opens up the tool, and then once I pick calendar, like I did before, it's going to load up U of A Campus Arboretum as the filter. So that will just show us the data submitted by the U of A Campus Arboretum observers. So again, I'm going to go to next. I don't need to do a boundary because we already have a very particular location where the data have been collected. And then again, I would change this to 2024 and then click next. So this is where I'm going to leave you if you're doing the local phenology program data, and just checking in again if there are any questions, if anyone's gotten stuck or needs to review anything. How are we doing? I don't see anything yet. Okay. So now I'm going to show you kind of the final way, or did you see something? Okay.
Yeah, there's some
Okay,
questions.
a couple things. Okay, yeah, let's look at these. So yeah, I'm sorry if it's too fast. We can if you want to follow along with the next one, I'll try to go really slow, and we will look at the how do you look at any data collected by anyone. So we'll do that next. And we'll look at visualizing different species when we get to this next step. And then only available on the desktop, not the app. You could, yeah, you can't visualize data in the app. You could potentially do this on your phone, but I wouldn't recommend it. I think it's best to do this on the desktop. It's only available on the website. And then we are going to look at 2024 because I want to show a complete calendar for the whole year, and we're only in March right now. So if you want to visualize 2025, you can, but I kind of want to make a calendar that shows the full year. So that's why we're going to look at last year. Okay. So, okay, I'm going to go back to the website here. And so if you are someone who's not a Nature's Notebook observer, you're not part of a program, if you just want to look at any data that are collected by anyone, then the way that you get in there is this menu here where it says Explore Phenology Data. So I click on that, and then you can see the first thing here on the left is Visualize Phenology Data. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to put the link in the chat so you can make sure that you are here. Okay, so we are at this landing page here. You can see there's actually another recording here if you want to review even more. Today, we're really focused on making a phenology calendar, but there's a bunch of other kinds of visualizations too. So that recording of a webinar from a couple years ago goes through all of the different visualizations. So that's another good resource for you. So to get into the tool, hopefully everyone who wants to be is on this landing page. You click on this link here, and that will load up the tool. And so you can see that this looks different than when we loaded it up before. So when we came in before, we could kind of skipped ahead to this. You can see at the panel on the left, this Data Explorer. When you come in through the website, this is what we call kind of the landing page that has tutorials on it. So if you really want to get to know the different types of visuals here, you can feel free to click on each of these visualizations for these 6 different stories. And these actually will give you a preloaded visualization and an explanation of what you're looking at, kind of how to interpret it, and then also how to change it if you'd like to look at other species or other locations or other years. So we're not going to go into each of these, but I invite you to explore those later if you'd like to get like a really good orientation to all the different kinds of visualizations that you can do here. So what we're going to do right now is, because we're going to make a phenology calendar, we're going to go to this Data Explorer. So that's on the left menu here, under the seasonal stories. That's where we are right now, the Data Explorer, and we're going to click on that. So now this looks like where we were before when we came in through the observation deck for your own data and through the local phenology program profile page on the Data tab. So again, we'll click Calendar. And so now you can see there's nothing here on the left for a filter. So before, when we did that, we saw our person ID, our observer ID, or we saw the name of the local phenology program. But now we're just going to look at all of the data available. So there's no filter that's preset. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a moment and make sure that everyone is here. So just to give you kind of an orientation too, I clicked on calendar and that gave me a bunch of different steps here on the left. So we're actually here right now, and this will kind of be like our navigation we're going to go through on the left. So we're picking our visualization type. We're going to go to the boundary layer. We're going to look at years. We're going to select species, and then we have some other features we can look at. So that's going to be kind of our process through the next few steps. Okay, so I'm going to go to next. And so now, because I don't have any filters set, I probably want to put some sort of a geographic boundary on here, especially if you're looking at a species that might have a lot of data. It can take kind of a long time to load up things if you have, data from all across the country. So you're welcome to do that and just look at all the data if you'd like. But I actually want to look at just kind of a smaller area. So there's a couple ways to do this. One is you can look at a predefined boundary, and probably the most useful one for most people will be this US states. We also have Fish and Wildlife Service regions and Forest Service regions and National Park Service regions because of our partnerships we've had in previous years with those agencies. But US states might be the most useful. So if you do that, you can then you can either go to this drop down and pick a state, or you can just click on the map. So I could pick Arizona. And that means that I basically set a filter. So I'm only going to look at the data collected in Arizona. You can also do a different area by drawing a polygon. So if I remove that state boundary, I can actually go and zoom in. If I want to look at, maybe I just want to look at the Tucson area because I'm interested in what's going on here. I can do a hand-drawn boundary. And then now I have this little plus sign where I can draw, and I click and then I drag the mouse around and I can actually draw a polygon. It can be however many sides you want, and then finish that polygon, and that'll actually give you only the data from within that little area. So any questions about that? Okay, so once I've drawn my polygon, I'm just going to look at the data from the Tucson area. I'm going to click next. And now I decided I wanted to look at 2024 data. You can add multiple years at a time if you want to kind of compare years, so we can maybe look at that later. But for now, I'm just going to make a single calendar for 2024. I'm going to go to next. So now it's going to load up, and what it's doing is it's taking into account the filter that I just put, and it's kind of narrowing down the data that are available. So what I have here is basically each of these is going to be one plot that I put on my calendar, one set of kind of year and phenophase and species. There's actually different taxonomic levels that you can put on here. So if you, for example, are interested in all maples, you could put this as genus, and then you could say Acer, and then just look at the maples. You can also do this obviously at the species level and see what's there, or you could even go to higher levels. I'm going to look at species today. The next thing on here is our species selector. And so you can see it says 131 there. That means there's 131 species in the Tucson area that have data collected in Nature's Notebook. And this actually, it's kind of nice because it ranks them here by the order of the species with the most data to the species with the least. So queen, that's actually the queen butterfly, is the one that has the most data. And then all the way down to, see what's at the bottom, cicadas at the bottom. So you can get a sense of if you're making a calendar and you want to make sure you have enough data that you can really look at and kind of tell a nice story, you might want to pick something that's more at the top of the list, or you can type something in. Let's say I'm interested in saguaro, so I'm going to type that in and that'll come up as well. So those are the ways to kind of pick the species. I actually want to look today at velvet mesquite. So I'm going to put that on here. Velvet mesquite is a nice native tree that we have here. It's a very important tree for a lot of wildlife species. It's very drought tolerant, so it's a good tree for us here in the desert. It also has pods that are edible. People actually grind the pods and eat them as mesquite flour. So it's a really interesting species. The next menu here is about the phenophase. So that's the life cycle stage. And you can pick up to 3 of these for your calendar. So you pick one and then you can do another plot with the second one and the third plot with the third one. So you just keep that in mind. We're going to be limited to just 3. For mesquite here, I'm going to look at young leaves. So right now, I actually have a mesquite tree outside my window, and it has a bunch of old leaves on it. A lot of the leaves have kind of fallen off. It's been losing leaves. It's one of our, we call it our drought deciduous tree. So it doesn't ever get totally bare of leaves, but it loses a lot of them. And then it grows fresh new leaves in the spring. And I'm always very anxious about whether it's going to have leaves come out again because it's a really important shade tree for our yard. But it always does, and it's usually later than I expect it to be. But usually around March or April is when we'll start seeing the really, really tiny little young leaves emerging. We also, on our mesquite trees here, they don't have buds like you might see on some of your more temperate trees like maples and things like that, because it doesn't get real cold here. So we just have these tiny leaves that all of a sudden start emerging. So I picked that as my first phenophase. I also get to pick the color, so I'm going to pick green because it's leaves. And now I can add a second plot. I'm going to add, I want to do mesquite again. So I'm going to keep it at the species level. I want to do another mesquite phenophase. And this time I want to do flowers. And flowers on the mesquite tree, they're flowers that are insect pollinated. They have sticky pollen, but I still feel like I sometimes blame them for my allergies because it's always when the mesquite flowers are open and they have their pollen that it seems like I get my allergies. So that's something that I track as well. I'm going to make these yellow because they're yellow flowers. And I'm going to add one more plot here, also for mesquite. And this time I want to look at the fruits because those ripe fruits are really important for knowing when I can collect them. There's some events around town here where you can actually take your beans in and then have them ground down into flour. So it's a good thing to know about the timing for that. And this one I'm going to make kind of a brown color. Okay, so I've got my 3, and you can see now I can't add any more. So I've reached the limit. You can only add 3 different species, phenophase combinations here. And then you can add multiple years, but we just have the 1 year, but you are restricted to just the 3. And then I'm going to click next, and then I will load up my calendar. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and just check in and see. And if you want to put in the chat, if you're doing this with us right now, what species you are visualizing, we'd love to hear about that. Or what species you want to visualize if you're not quite there yet or you're planning to do it later. Feel free to put in the chat. We'd love to hear about where you're at and what you're planning on looking at. We've got someone doing redbud. Oh, nice. Our redbud trees, we have several redbuds that are actually, they're on campus, planted, and they are full flower right now, just totally covered in flowers. They're beautiful. Okay, so we do have a question about, does everything you graph, oh, there it goes. Does everything you graph have to be from the same year? Can you compare the same phenophase on the same plant in different years? Yes. Yes, you can do that. So you could, if you wanted to, I can show this, but it's gonna start looking a little crazy. If I wanted to add more years, I go back over to this years part of the menu here, the panel, and then I can add on. And so you can see how once you start adding years, it starts to get really messy. But what you could do is you could add a bunch of years and then you could say, this is like too many phenophases. Go back over here and remove these. And then you'd like just see all the years for one phenophase. So yeah, that is possible. And I think there's maybe a limit of 10 years or something before it kind of maxes out, but it starts to get pretty hard to read. So I'm going to take those off. But yes, it's a good question. You can, and that's a really useful thing to look at too, comparing how phenophases have occurred across years. Okay, so going back over to my species here, just going to check back in the chat. Let's see. We've got people looking at lots of different things. New Jersey tea, maple comparison, sugar and red, very cool. Japanese knotweed, good to consider those invasives too. Got some red maple, serviceberry. Can we overlay more than one phenophase on the same calendar rather than separate rows? Oh, that's interesting. No, you can't. You can overlay, I guess, like multiple species by looking at something at the genus level, but we don't allow you to do that at the phenophase level. So yeah, it's an interesting thought though. I plan to look at red willow, Fremont, cottonwood, wax currant to start with. Very cool. Oak trees. Okay. Mine isn't showing color bands. Okay, we'll look at that. And then some big tooth maple. Very cool. Thanks for letting us know what you're visualizing. Okay, so I'm going to give you an orientation now to our calendar that we're looking at here. So once I hit that next button, it popped up with a whole bunch of colored lines. So each of these lines represents when someone said yes. So remember going back to that protocol that we looked at, the questions were, do you see young leaves? Do you see breaking leaf buds? Do you see flowers? If someone said yes in the Tucson area last year for velvet mesquite, it's going to have a green line here. And so the little 33 that is showing that when I hover over, that's actually the day of the year. So that would be, what would that be? February 2nd. There's like day of year conversion calendars if you want to look those up. So February 2nd was the first time someone said yes for young leaves. So that's why I'm so eagerly awaiting, because usually it's later on. But we had a couple people last year that said young leaves pretty early in the year. So when you see the line on here, it just tells you that there's at least one yes. So you can't really tell like how many people said yes. And so that is a limitation of the phenology calendar. We have other tools that get at more of that, like how many people said yes to this thing on this day. But for a calendar, it just kind of shows you, was there a yes record or not? And so as we get further into the spring, we can see there's a lot more frequent yeses where it's almost every day someone is saying yes. If we look at the flowers, we don't actually see any open flowers until day 87, somewhere in late March, with more frequently reported yeses more in May. There's a really random ripe fruit reported here. It could be that there was a pod that was hanging on a tree that kind of stayed on from the previous year. Or maybe it's an error. There are occasionally errors in the data, and that just kind of happens when you have a lot of people submitting data. So you just have to be aware of that. We don't take those out because, like I said, it could be that it was a pod that was on the tree. It could be that, with climate change, a lot of things happen at really weird times. We're seeing secondary flowering events. We're seeing really early flowering, really late. So we don't want to discount unusual kind of anomalous observations. So we just leave everything in there for you to explore. And we kind of rely on the data end users to do the cleaning process. But you can see other than that one, and maybe it was just one, that's another thing we can look at later. This record on one day, there are a lot more records of ripe fruits later in the summer. And that's typically when I would harvest my seed pods is in the summer. I try to get them before we get our first monsoon rain, because then things start to get a little moldy and stuff. So you got to get those pods off the ground. Let me check in on the chat just to make sure. Okay, someone said there was an issue with the band showing up and they had to refresh their page. Yeah, so if you're not seeing anything, you can always like click between, some of these menus here and that'll kind of refresh your calendar. So yeah, that might be something that's happening if you're not seeing anything. You also might have selected something where we don't have a lot of data. We do have a limited number of species. And so you might not see data for everything, if no one's collected data on it as well. Okay, so the next step is, we've gone and we've put everything on our calendar. If we go to next, it gives us some more options here for kind of changing the way that this calendar looks. Maybe the most interesting thing you can do is you can add what's called the negative data. And so if you're a Nature's Notebook observer, you're very familiar with how we emphasize the importance of those no records. So those are the records where if you go to your plant and you look for young leaves, but you don't see them, you still get to tap that N to say, I looked, but I didn't see this phenophase occurring. So this really gives you a lot more valuable information because it shows you not only when did someone see the young leaves or the phenophase, you can see that they went out and they just didn't see that phenophase happening. And so we have a number of months here where a lot of people were looking, but nothing was happening yet. So it's really nice to be able to add those no records in. You can also change the label size here. So if you want to make that bigger, that's what this does. You can move it up off of the position of it off of the bars. You can make the bars a little bit smaller. That might make it easier to read. You can kind of fiddle around with that until you get it how you like it. If you don't want to have the negative data on there, you can turn them off as well. And so once you have a calendar that you're happy with, there's a little download button here, and that will download it as an image file. And so then you have it and you can share it. You can also, if you want to share this actual place where you're at in the visualization tool as a bookmark, you can grab this link, which is under the panel here on the left to share visualization. And so you can copy that link, and it's actually going to be really long. I can put it in the chat for you so you can see what it looks like. It's a little scary looking. Oops, not looking for me right now. Let me grab it again. See if it'll let me paste it. Oh, it's not letting me paste. That's weird. I don't know what's going on there. Let me see if I can paste it in a browser. Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't let me. Maybe it's too long for the chat. But you can see if you paste it in a new window, it'll actually bring this back up. So if you want to share it with someone, and then, which is cool, you can actually adjust it. So maybe you share this with someone and they're like, oh, that's cool. I want to see what happens if I go back to 2023 and like what the data looked like that year, or what's going on so far this year in 2025. Not much so far. Now I'm curious and I want to see if there's a lot of negative data so far. Yeah, quite a bit. So a lot of people are reporting this year. We just don't have much data yet. That's a yes. Okay, any questions on that? Let me check the chat again. Yeah, so there's a comment about if it would be nice if the species were in alphabetical order. So the reason why we have them in that order in the dropdown is to help you understand which species have the most data. And so you can still search, by typing in a name, but what we want to do is make it easy for you to know. I guess let me just remove this one so I can show you again. So if I didn't have velvet mesquite, which are the species that we have the most data for? So it just makes it a little easier for you to know when you explore the data, you're going to be able to look at species that have a lot of data. Any other questions or thoughts? Let's see. Don't see anything so far. So I am actually going to now, because we still have some time, show you how to look at one more type of visualization that I feel like offers a lot of additional information to the calendar, and it's kind of a nice complement to the calendar, and that's called an activity curve. And I really like that because and you probably have seen them in McKinsey's emails. So McKinsey sends out all of our campaign emails, and if you're on any of our campaigns, you have seen McKinsey's activity curves because she always includes them in those emails because it's our favorite kind of visualization. So we're going to go back over here to visualization type. And now I'm going to change it from the calendar and I'm going to click on activity curve. So again, I went over to visualization type and then changed to activity curve. Now I'm going to go to next. I do want to go back and I'm going to set another filter on this area because I want to show you a similar set of species, but what it looks like in the activity curve. Thinking I'm also going to do 2024 again. And I want to look at species again. Okay, now we're at 130. So I'm going to look at my mesquite again and plot young leaves. And if you remember when we did the calendar, we were only able to see, was there a yes on this date or not? Or was there a no record? It doesn't tell us like how many people are reporting. So there's a lot of different metrics here. And so if you are looking at your own data, you might just do the total yes records. But because what we're doing is right now I'm looking at all the data collected in Tucson last year. There's a lot of people that are doing this. There's a lot of people that have really different schedules. We have a lot of data that come in from our students at the U of A, and they don't observe during the summer. They're usually gone. Same thing with a lot of our snowbirds, our residents that will leave Tucson in the summer when it's hot. And so it's pretty inconsistent throughout the year how much data we're getting. So if I change this from the total yes records to the proportion, that'll give me a little bit more of a consistent sampling. So instead of telling me how many yes records were there in any particular week, it'll tell me of the people that went out and looked, how many of those records were yes. So it kind of evens out the observer effort that we might see across the year. There's also some other metrics here that have to do with the total individual plants that have yes records, because sometimes people will have, a plant and they'll observe it 3 times in a week. And so you might not want to overweight your sample with a lot of records on one plant, whereas this other plant only had 1 record in a week. So it'll tell you how many of those plants had yes records. And the same thing with the proportion of plants, but I'm just going to keep it simple and do the proportion of yes records. Okay, so I have some data I'm looking at now, and you can see this is quite different than the calendar. So I'm still looking at from January 1st through December, like I was on the Phenology calendar, but instead of just seeing a yes or not a yes, we can see the proportion of yes records, and it really gives us a sense of when were the most people saying yes for young leaves in mesquite. And it gives you an idea of, basically this is at the month level. So which month did we see the most yes records? And so if I hover over the peak here, I can see that it was basically the month of April was when we saw the most people saying yes. And while I'm hovering over, you can see up at the top in the legend, it says 0.73, that's the actual proportion. So it's about, 7 out of 10. And it also says N, that's the number of records included in that month, kind of your sample size. If you want to go even more granular, then you go over to this date interval, and you can change that from monthly to either bi-weekly or even weekly to see which of the weeks was it. It's actually basically the middle of April when we had the most reports of young leaves. Any questions on that? Okay, so You have two plants of the same species on your site. Can you compare them? Um, I don't think there's really a way to do that. Actually, on the calendar that we kind of went past on the observation deck, you can do that there. But that's not working at the moment. Once we get that up and running, you'll be able to do that there. But yeah, we don't have a way to look at individual plant comparisons in the Viz tool here. I guess if you happen to have plants that were far enough apart where you could zoom in really close on the map and draw a little box around each of your plants, you could make two separate graphs and then put them together. But that might not be feasible depending on how close they are together and whether you could actually draw a little polygon around each of them. And then a question about exporting your graphics. Yeah, if you mean exporting the data, I can go through that for sure. Yeah, just to download your graphic, you just click that little button that gives you an image file of this calendar or this activity curve. But I'll show you how to export the data file as a spreadsheet if you want to do that as well. I could go through that at the end. Okay, so we right now have one phenophase. We're looking at our velvet mesquite young leaves. And so if I want to, I can add some more curves. So before we looked at 2024, we put mesquite and we looked at open flowers. So I can put that back on. I want to change it to yellow again. And I want to change this. It will default to total yes. So I'm going to change it to proportion just so they're all the same. And then I'm going to add my last curve for my fruits, my mesquite pods as well. All the way down to bright fruits. I'm going to change that to a different color. Okay. And then make sure I change that to proportion of yes. Okay, so I just basically did the same phenophases as I was showing on the calendar, copying the metric that I have for all of them as proportion of yes records. Okay, and so now that actually automatically loaded. So now, really, it's a really more rich graph than the phenology calendar because we get to see, when was the peak in activity. So if we're wondering when should I worry most about my allergies, if you happen to have allergies, you might look around the mid-May is when the peak in open flowers is going to be happening. Although sometimes there's another flowering event later in the year. This is another really interesting thing I think that's different than the calendar. The calendar might show you there's a yes in the spring and there's a yes in the fall. But by looking at this, we can see, well, the peak where the most flowers is actually way up here in May. But then there's a smaller event where like fewer of the people were saying yes in the fall. So we can kind of see the difference between those flowering events and how one is bigger than the other. And then for fruits, it looks like it's kind of two peaks here. Maybe there's like a couple different areas in town or something where it's different things are happening. But we've got kind of one around June and then another one later in July, another peak. Another thing that I really like about the activity curves is you can compare not only how do the phenophases relate to each other and then how do the years relate to each other, but you can add on animals and plants to see about the interaction between species. And so one project that we actually have going on here in Tucson has to do with a bird called the Lucy's warbler. This is a collaboration with the Tucson Audubon here in town. And they are concerned about Lucy's warblers. The Lucy's warbler, it's a really cool little songbird, and it loves to nest in this like peeling bark that the velvet mesquites have. And these velvet mesquites are actually getting more and more rare here in Tucson because we've had all these people that have brought in these non-native mesquites. There's a Chilean mesquite, there's a whole bunch of other ones, and they are really good at hybridizing with our native trees. And so we have all these trees that are coming up that are not true velvet mesquites. And the hybrids and the non-native mesquites don't really have that peeling bark. And so Tucson Audubon has been trying to share around like nest boxes to kind of help the Lucy's warbler have a place to nest. And they're also really interested in knowing, is there like a particular cue that the Lucy's take to know like when to go find a mesquite tree? And so they're really interested in what's happening with the phenology and whether the timing of when the Lucy's are nesting has to do with like when the mesquites are leafing out or maybe when they're flowering or what it is about it. So if I want to add on Lucy's warblers, I can actually add on a curve here. We're not limited to 3 like we are on the calendar. We can do more than 3. So I'm gonna see if I can add Lucy's on here. And I actually am really interested in nest building. I don't know how many records we're gonna have here. It's kind of hard to see. Maybe I'll make them blue. Now I do the proportion. Okay, so we can see there's not a lot of records. If I hover over, we're only seeing about, I guess, 8 different records. But it's interesting that when we see Lucy's warbler nest building, so this blue line, it does kind of coincide with when the young leaves are starting to increase on the mesquite trees. So this is just 1 year of data. We definitely need multiple years to know for sure. But this is something where we could actually get a sense of how the activity of nest building relates to the phenology of the tree. And so we might, if we see multiple years like this, we might say, oh, maybe it is the leaf out timing of the mesquites that is coinciding with the timing of the Lucy's nesting. Any questions? Okay, yeah, we are going to go through exporting data. Yeah, is anyone, have you made a calendar? Has anyone successfully made a calendar or an activity curve yet? If you can let us know in the chat, we'd love to hear it. You can see we do have a question about how do observers or organizations add plant or animal species. So we have a set number of species on the Nature's Notebook list. Let me just show you where to see that list. So I'm going to go back to the website here. If you want to see all the species that are available, we're back on the USA-NPN website. I'm going to go to this Observe with Nature's Notebook page. And then if I scroll down where I was showing you before some of the examples, go to this See All button here. And then you'll arrive at this page, which is basically a way to search all of the species that are available. I'll put this direct link in the chat. And here you can search for species. So yeah, you can search for like all maple trees. You could search for, I want to see all the species available in Arizona. There's a lot of them. There's many, many pages, 77 pages of these. You could do some more refined filters too. If you're looking for a particular group of animals or plants, that's a way to kind of narrow down and you can see what's available. So we have over 1,800 species right now. We really are trying to limit the species because our goal is to have a data set that's useful for researchers and natural resource managers and others to use. If we let people observe anything in the country, it's going to kind of dilute out the observation effort, and we're going to end up with just a little bit of data on a lot of species. And we want to have a lot of data on a few set of focal species. So we do limit that. But we do have a process for adding species. So if you are, especially if you're part of a local phenology program where we know you're part of a group of people and you're all going to be collecting data, we're more likely to add a species for you. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. Feel free to email me if you really want to add a species, and I will send you the process for that. Let's see. We have a couple people that have made calendar or graphic. Deborah made one. It seems fairly easy. That's great. And Natalie made an activity curve comparing spicebush and barberry. Very cool. And you're going to use it in an upcoming presentation. That's wonderful. Okay, we have a
I think
question.
we had I was gonna say in the live or the Q&A, he asked if you can do native plants from several decades back. I think our Viz tool only goes back to 2010, right? That's the earliest that we have that we can visualize data for. So anything before that, I don't think we can visualize with the visualization tool. But if you have plants from then on, you can visualize that with stuff from this year.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, our program, Nature's Notebook, started officially in 2008, but yeah, really 2010 is when we have majority of the records really started coming in. There's a few plants that you can actually enter data from like many years back. So we have some people that kind of back entered historical data, but those are few and far between. So yeah, I would look at 2010 and beyond if you're going to try to visualize data for sure. Yeah, that's a great question. A question about, is there a way to visualize the quantity of flowers or open flowers? No, we really want to add a visualization that uses the intensity data. And let me tell you, we have been exploring how to do this for years. It's so much more complicated than you would think. And just to make sure people know what I'm talking about, let me go to one of our plants here. So the question's about not just the yes or no records, but the kind of the quantity. And so on our protocols, we ask you, do you see flowers or flower buds? And then we also ask you, if you did see them, can you estimate how many? And this is totally optional. You don't have to answer this. It can be kind of overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out. But we do have a lot of people that collect this data. I think about 80% of Nature's Notebook observers will also give us the intensity data. And we've been trying to come up with a way to visualize this, and we're calling it kind of our peak phenometrics, our summary of peak. And it just gets really complicated when we're trying to do it. We've been exploring it a lot with flowering data in the context of this project called Time to Restore, which has to do with pollinator plants and when nectar is available. And it can be pretty messy because what we envision the peak should look like is, you would start out recording less than 3, and then it goes up to 3 to 10, and then 11 to 100, all the way up to the max, and kind of a nice curve. But what the data actually look like is more often kind of this like ping pong over time. And we've been trying to figure out why that is. Sometimes it's like different interpretations by different observers of what the number should be. I think some of that confusion has to do with counting individual flowers versus clusters of flowers as inflorescences. And then some of it is just, flowers will bloom and then they die and then they regrow. And so the numbers can change quite a bit. So we've been trying to figure out kind of a process for doing the intensity data. And we're not quite there yet, but I hope after this year we'll have something where we can allow you to visualize it. But that was a really long answer. But eventually, we really want to do it. We're working on it. Someone else, Yvette, looked at pollen and fruiting in live oak. Oh, very cool. I'm glad that some of you were able to make a calendar or an activity curve. I'm going to go back in. Where was the one? Here's my nice calendar here. So if you'd like to export the data, so say you would maybe like a spreadsheet of this information, you're going to do some more investigating with that. You can export these data. So go back over to this panel here, and I showed you that the link, the bookmark link, there's also this export link. So if you click that, this will load up the tool that we have to basically give you a spreadsheet. So you come into the tool and it says your data has been preset with the selections from the visualization tool. Now you have to select a data type. And so there's actually 4 different data types here. And if you click on each of them, you can get more of an explanation of what they are. This is the most basic one, status and intensity. This one's going to give you basically all of the yes or no data and the intensity data. And if you downloaded this as a spreadsheet, each row in your data file is going to basically be like one of those answers to one question. So it would be on this date, at this location, on this velvet mesquite, I said yes for young leaves. And I said if there was a percentage associated with that or something, an intensity question, what that answer was. The individual phenometrics is more of a summarized version of that. So one row in this data set would be kind of collapsing down for the whole season, and it would tell you for this location, for velvet mesquite, the first time you said yes for young leaves was on this date, and then the last date you said yes was this date. And there was a prior no before your first yes within this amount of days, and there was a no after your last yes within this amount of days, and it gives you kind of that period of time that that phenophase was active. The site phenometrics is if you have more than one plant at a site, it collapses it down and gives you an average. So if you had 3 mesquites, it will give you the average first date of young leaves, and then the average last date, and it'll tell you how many plants and the variation between them. And then this last one is what we use for the activity curve. So it's that proportion. So it's telling you, depending on if you're doing weekly, biweekly, or monthly, within that interval, what was the proportion of yes records or the total yes records for leaves for that plant. So those are your options, and you can read those descriptions if you need a recap of that. And so then, yeah, there's a bunch of other things you can do on here if you want to filter down further, but you can go through those and then you would agree to the data use and attribution policies and then download, and it'll give you an Excel spreadsheet. Oh, we had another success, a calendar for Red Willow. Very cool. So we have a couple minutes left. Are there any last questions that I can answer? We are recording this webinar. We're going to be sharing the recording out with everyone that registered. We'll also post it on our YouTube channel, post it on the Phenology Week landing page. Please join us tomorrow for our researcher Q&A. And also keep the amazing social media posts coming. We've really been enjoying seeing all the photos that people have been posting and the stories and the phenology friends that you've been finding. Is today the bird day, Mackenzie?
Yeah, it is.
So we're focused today on, I'll go back to the Phenology Week landing page. If you want to see kind of what we're focused on, we have a media kit that has all of our different observation challenges for each day, if you want to help us share those. So here today, we are focused on, yes, our phenology bird friends. So please continue posting. Okay, last chance for questions. And feel free to reach out if you have any trouble with the visualization tool or have any questions. We're happy to answer those. Definitely want to help you look at the data. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, so thank you all for joining us today and for celebrating the spring equinox with us. We hope to see you tomorrow for our final webinar. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.